Lady Seraphina Ashford pressed her face against the carriage window, watching the last traces of civilization disappear behind rolling hills shrouded in mist. The ancient forest that surrounded Prince Dorian's domain seemed to swallow the very light from the sky, leaving only shadows and the whispered promises of secrets better left undisturbed. She pulled her woolen cloak tighter around her shoulders, not from the cold, but from the weight of what awaited her at journey's end. The Vampire Prince's castle, her new home, her prison. "Stop fidgeting, Seraphina." Her mother's voice cut through the carriage like a blade. Lady Margaret Ashford sat rigid across from her, every line of her body radiating disapproval. "You're already enough of an embarrassment without looking like a nervous wreck." Seraphina's hand moved instinctively to smooth her unruly chestnut hair, then dropped to her lap. There was no point. No amount of primping would transform her into the beauty her family had always wished she could be. At 23, she was considered well past her prime by society's standards. Too tall, too soft around the edges, too interested in dusty tomes and ancient languages to master the delicate art of feminine charm. "I still cannot believe Father agreed to this madness." Isabel spoke from her corner of the carriage, her voice dripping with disdain. At 19, Lady Isabel Ashford was everything Seraphina was not. Petite, golden-haired, with cornflower blue eyes that could make grown men stumble over their words. She was also cruel in the particular way that only those blessed with natural beauty could be. Sending her instead of me is an insult to our entire bloodline. "It's an insult to the Vampire Prince," Lady Margaret corrected coldly. "Which is precisely the point. When he sees what we've sent him, he'll break the treaty himself. We'll be free of this unholy alliance without appearing to be the ones who reneged on our agreement." Seraphina felt the familiar sting of tears behind her eyes, but she'd learned long ago not to let them fall. Her family's plan was as transparent as it was cruel. Send the disappointing daughter as a deliberate slight, hoping the Vampire Prince would be so offended that he'd dissolve their arrangement entirely. "What if he doesn't refuse?" Seraphina asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the clatter of wheels on stone. "Don't be ridiculous," Isabel laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Look at yourself, sister dear. You're hardly the type to inspire passion in any man, let alone a creature of legend. He'll take one look at you and send you home in disgrace. And if he doesn't?" Seraphina pressed, some stubborn part of her refusing to accept defeat. Lady Margaret's expression grew even colder. "Then you'll serve your purpose as a political pawn and stop embarrassing this family with your very existence." The words hit like physical blows, but Seraphina had endured worse from her family. She turned back to the window, watching the dark trees blur past, and tried to imagine what the Vampire Prince would be like. The stories painted him as a monster, ancient, cruel, with eyes like winter storms and a heart as cold as the grave. They said he'd ruled his domain for over 4 centuries, that he could kill a man with a glance, that he fed on the blood of virgins under the full moon. But Seraphina had read enough history to know that stories often bore little resemblance to truth. Perhaps Prince Dorian was simply a man, albeit an immortal one, trying to navigate the complex politics of a world that feared what it didn't understand. The carriage began to slow, and Seraphina's heart hammered against her ribs as she caught her first glimpse of Ravencroft Castle. It rose from the mist like something from a gothic novel, all soaring towers and flying buttresses, with windows that gleamed like watching eyes in the fading light. It was beautiful in a terrible, imposing way, the kind of beauty that spoke of power and secrets and things that mortals were not meant to comprehend. "God help us all," Lady Margaret whispered, making the sign of the cross. The carriage rolled to a stop in a courtyard paved with black stone, and Seraphina could hear the nervous whinnying of the horses. Even the animals could sense that this place was different, touched by something beyond the natural world. A figure emerged from the castle's main entrance, tall, pale, dressed in midnight black. Even from a distance, Seraphina could feel the weight of his presence, the way the very air seemed to thicken around him. This had to be Prince Dorian himself. "Remember," Lady Margaret hissed as a footman opened their carriage door, "you are here to be rejected. Do not do anything that might make him actually want to keep you." Seraphina almost laughed at the absurdity of it, as if there was any danger of that. She stepped down from the carriage on unsteady legs, her simple gray traveling dress a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. The courtyard was lit by torches that cast dancing shadows on the ancient stone, and she could smell something in the air. Not decay or death as she'd expected, but something like winter nights and old books and secrets whispered in forgotten languages. Lady Seraphina Ashford, I presume. The voice was like aged whiskey, smooth, dark with an undertone that sent shivers down her spine. She looked up to find herself staring into the most extraordinary eyes she'd ever seen. They were indeed like winter storms, but not cold as the stories claimed. Instead, they held depths that spoke of centuries of experience, of wisdom earned through suffering, of a loneliness so profound it made her chest ache in sympathy. Prince Dorian was tall, taller than any man she'd ever met, with dark hair that caught the torchlight and features that belonged in a Renaissance painting. He was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often were, but there was something else there too, something that looked almost like curiosity. "Your Highness?" she managed, dropping into what she hoped was an acceptable curtsy. "I am honored by your welcome. Are you?" His head tilted slightly, and she had the unsettling feeling that he could see straight through her polite facade to the terror and resignation beneath. How refreshing. Honesty is so rare in political arrangements. Lady Margaret stepped forward, her smile brittle as winter ice. "Your Highness, may I present my daughter, Lady Seraphina? I do hope she will prove adequate to your needs." The emphasis on adequate was impossible to miss, and Seraphina felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. Even here, even now, her mother couldn't resist one final twist of the knife. But Prince Dorian's attention remained fixed on Seraphina, his storm-gray eyes studying her with an intensity that made her want to disappear into the shadows. She waited for the inevitable dismissal, the polite but firm rejection that would send her home in disgrace. Instead, he stepped closer, and she caught that scent again. Winter and secrets and something indefinably ancient. "Tell me, Lady Seraphina," he said, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "What do you know of the old bloodlines? The families that served as keepers of memory in ages past?" The question was so unexpected that she blinked in confusion. What do you mean, Your Highness?" "The mark on your shoulder," he said simply. "The one you've hidden beneath powder and high necklines your entire life. Do you know what it signifies?" Seraphina's hand flew instinctively to her left shoulder, where beneath the fabric of her dress lay a birthmark she'd always considered another of her many imperfections. It was roughly the size of a silver coin, dark against her pale skin, shaped like an intricate knot that seemed to shift and change depending on the light. "How could you possibly know about—" "Because I've been searching for someone who bears that mark for over 400 years, Prince Dorian said, his voice carrying a weight of emotion that made her breath catch. "And you, Lady Seraphina Ashford, are the first person I've encountered who carries the blood of the memory keepers." The world seemed to tilt around her. Memory keepers? She'd never heard the term before, but something about it resonated in her bones, as if she were remembering something she'd never actually learned. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will," Prince Dorian said, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he smiled. It transformed his entire face, making him look less like a creature of legend and more like a man who'd just found something precious that he'd thought was lost forever. "Lady Margaret, Lady Isabel, thank you for delivering your daughter safely to my domain. You may return to your estate with my gratitude and the assurance that the treaty between our families will be honored. But surely you'll want time to evaluate her suitability," Lady Margaret said, her voice strained with barely concealed panic. This was not going according to plan. "I've seen all I need to see," Prince Dorian replied smoothly. "Lady Seraphina will suit my purposes perfectly." Isabel stepped forward, her beautiful face twisted with something ugly. "Your Highness, surely there's been some mistake. I am the elder daughter's sister, and I would be much more appropriate." "You would not," Prince Dorian cut her off, his voice carrying a note of authority that made everyone in the courtyard take a step back. "Lady Seraphina possesses something I require, something that cannot be replicated or replaced. She will remain here as my bride." Bride. The word hit Seraphina like a physical blow. She'd known this was the purpose of her journey, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that terrified her. "Your Highness," she said, finding her voice at last, "perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any final decisions." "There is nothing to discuss," he said, but his tone was gentler when he addressed her. "You are exactly what I've been searching for, Lady Seraphina. I hope in time you'll come to understand what that means. The next hour passed in a blur of hurried farewells and whispered threats. Lady Margaret pulled Seraphina aside just before departing, her fingers digging into her daughter's arm hard enough to leave bruises. "I don't know what game you're playing," she hissed, "but don't think this changes anything. You're still the same disappointing creature you've always been. He'll tire of you soon enough, and when he does, don't come crawling back to us." "I wouldn't dream of it, Mother," Seraphina replied with a calmness that surprised them both. Isabel's farewell was even less warm. "Enjoy your monster, sister," she whispered, her blue eyes glittering with malice. "I'm sure you'll make each other very happy." And then they were gone, their carriage disappearing into the mist as if it had never been there at all. Seraphina stood in the courtyard, alone with the vampire prince and a handful of silent servants, feeling as if she'd just stepped off the edge of the world. "Come," Prince Dorian said, offering her his arm. "Let me show you to your chambers. We have much to discuss." The castle's interior was even more impressive than its exterior, all soaring ceilings and tapestried walls, with artwork that spanned centuries and cultures. Seraphina found herself slowing to examine a particular painting, a medieval depiction of a woman with dark hair and knowing eyes. "She was one of your predecessors," Prince Dorian said, noticing her interest. "Lady Morgana of Blackthorne. She served my great-grandfather as a memory keeper in the 14th century. "What exactly is a memory keeper?" Seraphina asked, tearing her gaze away from the painting. "Someone with the ability to see and preserve vampiric memories," he explained as they continued down the corridor. "Our kind live for centuries, sometimes millennia, but our minds are not infinite. Over time, memories fade or become corrupted. Memory keepers can access those lost recollections and restore them to their original clarity. And you believe I have this ability? I know you do. The mark you bear is proof of your bloodline, and I can sense the power in you even if you cannot yet access it yourself." They stopped before an ornate door carved with symbols that seemed to shift and dance in the torchlight. Prince Dorian opened it to reveal a suite of rooms that took Seraphina's breath away. The sitting room was decorated in rich blues and silvers, with a fire crackling merrily in the hearth, and shelves lined with more books than she'd ever seen in one place. "These will be your chambers," he said. "The bedroom is through that door, and there's a private bath beyond that. If you need anything, ring for Mrs. Hartwell. She's been the castle's housekeeper for nearly 60 years and knows where everything is." This is too much," Seraphina said, running her fingers over the spine of a leather-bound volume. "I'm not used to such luxury. You'll have to become accustomed to it. As my bride, you'll want for nothing." The word bride hung between them like a sword. Seraphina turned to face him, gathering her courage. "Your Highness, I must ask, why marriage? If you simply need someone with this ability, surely there are other arrangements that would serve your purposes." Prince Dorian was quiet for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes studying her face. "Call me Dorian," he said finally, "and the answer is complicated. I have time. The bond between a vampire and a memory keeper is intimate. It requires absolute trust, complete vulnerability. Marriage provides a framework for that level of connection, a legal and social structure that protects both parties. And if I refuse, then you're free to leave. I won't force you into anything, Seraphina, but I hope you'll at least allow me to explain what I'm asking of you before you make your decision." The use of her given name sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. No one had ever spoken it with such careful consideration, as if it were something precious rather than a burden to be endured. "Very well," she said. "Explain." Dorian moved to the window, staring out at the mist-shrouded grounds. "I've lived for 437 years, he began. In that time I've accumulated memories that span centuries, wars, plagues, the rise and fall of kingdoms. But somewhere in my past, there are gaps, crucial memories that have been lost or stolen, and I need them back." "Stolen?" "There are those among my kind who have the ability to manipulate memory, to take or alter recollections for their own purposes. I believe someone did this to me, but I cannot remember who or why. All I know is that there are decades of my life that are simply gone." Seraphina felt a stab of sympathy. She couldn't imagine losing years of her own memories, even if many of them were painful. "And you think I can help you recover them?" "I know you can. The question is whether you're willing to try. What would it involve?" Dorian turned back to her, and she was struck again by the loneliness in his eyes. A joining of minds. You would need to access my memories directly, sort through centuries of recollections to find what's missing and restore what's been damaged. It's not without risk. Human minds aren't designed to hold vampiric memories, and the process can be overwhelming.
Dangerous? Potentially. There have been memory keepers who lost themselves in the process, who became so immersed in vampiric memories that they forgot their own identity. But there have also been those who emerged stronger, with abilities beyond anything they'd possessed before. Seraphina moved to the fireplace, staring into the dancing flames as she considered his words. Her entire life she'd been told she was worthless, inadequate, a disappointment to everyone around her.
Now this ancient, powerful being was telling her that she possessed something rare and valuable, something he'd searched for across centuries. "Why should I believe you?" she asked quietly. "How do I know this isn't some elaborate deception?" "Because," Dorian said, moving to stand beside her, "you can feel it, can't you? The pull between us, the recognition that goes deeper than mere physical attraction. Your blood calls to mind, Seraphina. You were born for this purpose." He was right, and that terrified her. From the moment she'd looked into his eyes, she'd felt something shift inside her, as if a door she'd never known existed had suddenly swung open. There was a connection between them that defied explanation, something that made her want to trust him despite every rational thought in her head. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course, take all the time you need. But Seraphina?" He waited until she looked at him. "Whatever you decide, know that you are welcome here. Not as a political pawn or a disappointing daughter, but as yourself. For the first time in your life, you have the opportunity to be valued for exactly who you are." After he left, Seraphina sank into one of the plush chairs by the fire, her mind reeling. Everything she'd thought she knew about herself, about her place in the world, had been turned upside down in the space of a few hours. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. A woman entered, elderly but spry with silver hair and kind eyes. "Lady Seraphina, I'm Mrs. Hartwell, the housekeeper. His Highness asked me to see if you needed anything." I'm not sure what I need," Seraphina admitted. Mrs. Hartwell's expression softened. "Perhaps a hot bath and a proper meal. Travel can be so exhausting, especially when one is facing such momentous changes." "That sounds wonderful, thank you." As Mrs. Hartwell bustled about preparing the bath and laying out fresh clothes, Seraphina found herself studying the older woman. There was something about her that seemed familiar, though she was certain they'd never met. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said, as the housekeeper helped her out of her travel-stained dress. "How long have you served Prince Dorian?" "Nearly 60 years now, my lady. I came here as a young woman, not much older than yourself." "And you've been happy here?" Mrs. Hartwell paused in her ministrations, her eyes growing distant. "His Highness is a good master, my lady. Kinder than many mortal lords I've known. He's given me a home, a purpose, a family of sorts among the other staff. I've never regretted my decision to stay." "Even knowing what he is?" "Especially knowing what he is," Mrs. Hartwell said firmly. "Vampires are not the monsters the stories make them out to be, my lady. They're simply different, and His Highness has spent centuries learning to be more human than many humans I've known." As Seraphina sank into the hot bath, she found herself thinking about Mrs. Hartwell's words. The woman clearly cared for Dorian, spoke of him with genuine affection and respect. That had to count for something. The bath was followed by a meal that was far better than anything she'd eaten in her family's house. Roasted chicken with herbs, fresh bread, vegetables that actually tasted like they'd been grown with care rather than duty. She was just finishing when another knock came at her door. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Hartwell. Instead, Dorian entered, carrying a leather-bound book that looked ancient even by castle standards. "I thought you might like to read about the memory keepers," he said, setting the book on the table beside her. "This chronicles the history of your bloodline, going back nearly 1,000 years." Seraphina's hands trembled as she opened the cover. The pages were filled with elegant script in multiple languages, accompanied by detailed illustrations of the mark she bore, and others like it. "This is incredible," she breathed, turning page after page of history she'd never known existed. "All these women, and they were all memory keepers?" "Your ancestors, yes. The bloodline has been carefully tracked and protected for centuries, though it's grown increasingly rare. You may be the last." "The last?" The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a lead cloak. "Which is why your decision is so important," Dorian said gently. "Not just for me, but for the preservation of knowledge that could be lost forever." Seraphina continued reading, absorbing stories of women who'd lived extraordinary lives, who'd been valued and respected for their unique abilities. It was everything she'd never dared to dream of, a legacy of strength and purpose that made her feel connected to something larger than herself. "There's something else," Dorian said, his voice careful. "Something I should tell you about the marriage arrangement." Seraphina looked up from the book, her heart skipping. "What? It doesn't have to be traditional. If you agree to help me, if you consent to the ceremony, it can be a marriage in name only. I won't force any intimacies upon you that you don't welcome." The relief that flooded through her was followed immediately by something that might have been disappointment. "I see. Unless, of course, you wanted something more," he added quietly. "In which case, I would be amenable to that as well." Their eyes met across the room, and Seraphina felt that strange pull again, stronger this time. There was something about this man, this vampire, that called to her in ways she didn't understand. He was offering her everything she'd never dared to hope for. Respect, purpose, a place where she belonged. "I'll do it," she said, the words coming out before she could second-guess herself. "You'll help me recover my memories?" "I'll marry you," she clarified. "I'll become your memory keeper. I'll help you find what you've lost." The smile that spread across Dorian's face was like sunrise after the longest night. "Thank you," he said, and there was such genuine gratitude in his voice that it made her chest tight with emotion. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow night, if you're willing. There's no point in delaying, and the sooner we begin working together, the sooner we can start uncovering the truth. Tomorrow night." In less than 24 hours, she would be married to a vampire prince, bound to him in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something that might have been anticipation. "Very well," she said. "Tomorrow night it is." The wedding took place in the castle's ancient chapel, a soaring space lit by hundreds of candles and filled with the scent of night-blooming jasmine. Seraphina wore a gown that Mrs. Hartwell had somehow procured, midnight blue silk that complemented her dark hair and made her feel, for the first time in her life, genuinely beautiful. Dorian stood waiting at the altar, resplendent in formal black, his storm-gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her pulse race. The ceremony was conducted by an elderly priest who seemed remarkably unfazed by the supernatural nature of the groom, and the vows they exchanged were traditional enough that Seraphina could almost pretend this was a normal wedding. Almost. "Do you, Prince Dorian Blackthorne, take Lady Seraphina Ashford to be your wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Dorian said, his voice carrying clearly through the chapel. "And do you, Lady Seraphina Ashford, take Prince Dorian Blackthorne to be your husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" Seraphina looked into Dorian's eyes and saw something there that took her breath away. Not just gratitude or political necessity, but genuine affection, perhaps even the beginning of something deeper. "I do," she said. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Dorian stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face with surprising gentleness. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. "No," she admitted, "but I'm willing to try." His kiss was soft, careful, nothing like the brutal claiming she'd expected from the stories. It tasted of promises and possibilities, of a future that might hold more than either of them dared to hope for. When they broke apart, Seraphina was surprised to find tears on her cheeks. Not tears of sorrow or fear, but something else entirely. Relief, perhaps, or the strange joy of finally finding a place where she belonged. "Welcome to the family, Your Highness," Mrs. Hartwell said warmly as they left the chapel, and Seraphina realized with a start that she was now a princess. Princess Seraphina Blackthorne. It had a nice ring to it. The wedding feast was intimate, just the castle staff and a few of Dorian's closest advisors, all of whom seemed genuinely pleased by the match. Seraphina found herself relaxing as the evening progressed, laughing at stories of Dorian's past mishaps and contributing her own tales of scholarly adventures gone wrong. "You seem surprised," Dorian observed as they shared a dance, his hand warm and steady at her waist. I expected this to feel more ominous, she admitted. Instead, it feels almost normal. Disappointed? Relieved, she said honestly. I've spent my entire life being afraid of not being enough. It's strange to be somewhere that I might actually be too much. You could never be too much, Dorian said seriously. You're exactly what I need, Seraphina. What I've always needed. As the evening wound down, Seraphina found herself growing nervous about what came next. Dorian had promised that their marriage could remain unconsummated, but they were still expected to share chambers, to begin the process of joining their minds and memories. Are you ready? Dorian asked as they stood outside the door to what were now their shared rooms. I don't think anyone could be ready for this, she said. But yes, let's begin. The sitting room had been transformed in their absence. Candles flickered on every surface, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and someone had arranged cushions on the floor in front of the fireplace. It looked less like a bedroom and more like a sanctuary, a place where sacred work might be done. The process is easier if we're both relaxed, Dorian explained, settling onto the cushions and patting the space beside him. Physical contact helps, but nothing more intimate than you're comfortable with. Seraphina sat beside him, acutely aware of the warmth radiating from his body. For a creature that was supposed to be cold and dead, he felt remarkably alive. What do I need to do? She asked. Close your eyes and let your mind open to mine. Don't fight what you see or feel. Just let it flow through you. And if I get lost, I'll bring you back, he promised. No matter what happens, I won't let you get lost in my memories. Seraphina closed her eyes and tried to relax, feeling Dorian's hand settle gently over hers. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually, she became aware of something else in her mind, a presence that was distinctly not her own. Images began to flicker behind her eyelids. A medieval castle under siege, a woman with dark hair and sad eyes, a man in elaborate robes speaking words in a language she didn't recognize. The images came faster now, a torrent of memories spanning centuries, battles and balls, loves and losses, moments of triumph and despair. But there were gaps too, dark spaces where memories should have been, like pages torn from a book. And in those gaps, she sensed something else, a deliberate wrongness, as if someone had carefully excised specific recollections. I can see them, she whispered, not opening her eyes. The missing pieces. Someone took them, but they left traces behind. Can you tell who? Seraphina concentrated, following the threads of damaged memory deeper into Dorian's mind. The missing sections all seemed to center around a particular time period, roughly 60 years ago, based on the surrounding memories. There, she said, her voice growing stronger as her confidence increased. 63 years ago. Someone you trusted. Someone close to you. They didn't just take the memories. They replaced them with false ones. Who? Dorian's voice was tight with emotion. Seraphina pushed deeper, following the trail of deception to its source. The false memories were skillfully crafted, but they had a particular signature, a way of layering emotion that felt familiar somehow. A woman, she said. Someone with vampire abilities, but also something else. Magic. But not the kind vampires usually possess. Morgana, Dorian breathed. My former advisor. She disappeared 60 years ago, and I could never remember why. She didn't disappear, Seraphina said, the truth unfolding in her mind like a flower blooming. You banished her. She was stealing from you not just memories but power. She was using your connection to other vampires to drain their strength, and when you discovered it, I confronted her, Dorian finished, his own memories beginning to return as Seraphina's power worked to restore them. She tried to kill me, but I was stronger. I stripped her of her position and cast her out, but not before she managed to steal the memories of her betrayal. She wanted you to forget why you'd banished her, so she could return someday and claim that she'd been wrongfully accused. And I would have believed her, because I had no memory of her crimes. Dorian's hand tightened on hers. Seraphina, you've given me back decades of my life. How can I ever repay you? By being happy, she said simply, opening her eyes to find him staring at her with wonder. By using these memories to build something better. There's more, he said. Other gaps, other stolen pieces. Will you help me find them all? Of course. We have time. We do, he agreed. And then he was kissing her again, this time with a passion that made her toes curl. We have all the time in the world." As they broke apart, Seraphina realized that something fundamental had changed between them. The careful politeness was gone, replaced by something deeper and more real. She could feel his emotions through their mental connection. Gratitude, yes, but also genuine affection and the beginning of something that might grow into love. "Dorian," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes? I think I'd like this marriage to be more than just a political arrangement." His smile was brilliant. "I was hoping you'd say that." "Good," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Because I find that I'm quite fond of you, husband, and I am utterly enchanted by you, wife." As they settled in for the night, truly together now in every sense that mattered, Seraphina reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. 24 hours ago, she'd been the scorned daughter, sent away as an insult. Now she was a princess, a memory keeper, and the wife of a man who valued her for exactly who she was. "Dorian," she said, as they lay entwined before the fire. My family expected you to reject me. They sent me here hoping you'd be so insulted that you'd break the treaty." "I know," he said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Your mother made her intentions quite clear. Aren't you angry?" "On the contrary, I'm grateful. Their cruelty brought me exactly what I needed most." He pulled back to look at her, though I suspect they won't be pleased when they learn how well this arrangement has worked out. Seraphina thought of her mother's cold dismissal, of Isabel's cruel laughter, of a lifetime of being told she wasn't enough. "No," she said with satisfaction. "I don't think they will be. Do you care?" "Not even a little bit." And she meant it. For the first time in her life, Seraphina had found a place where she belonged, where her unique gifts were valued rather than scorned. She had a husband who looked at her like she was precious, a purpose that gave her life meaning, and the promise of adventures yet to come. Let her family rage and plot and scheme. She was Princess Seraphina Blackthorne now, memory keeper to the Vampire Prince, and she had finally found her happily ever after. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks later, in the form of a letter bearing the Ashford family seal. Seraphina was in the library, working with Dorian to restore another section of his damaged memories, when Mrs. Hartwell brought the correspondence. "From your family, Your Highness," the housekeeper said, her expression troubled. Seraphina took the letter with reluctance, recognizing her father's heavy script on the envelope. Lord Edmund Ashford rarely wrote to anyone, preferring to conduct his business through intermediaries and servants. "What does it say?" Dorian asked, noting her hesitation. Seraphina broke the seal and unfolded the parchment, her heart sinking as she read the contents. "They're coming here," she said. "My entire family, along with several other noble houses. They claim it's a social visit, to celebrate our marriage and strengthen the alliance between our families. But you don't believe that's their true purpose. My family doesn't make social visits, especially not to places they consider beneath them." Seraphina set the letter aside with distaste. "They're planning something. Let them come," Dorian said calmly. "Whatever they're plotting, we'll be ready for it. You don't understand. My family, they're not just cruel, they're clever, and they have connections throughout the noble houses, alliances built on shared prejudices and mutual benefit." "Seraphina," Dorian said, taking her hands in his, "you're not the powerless girl they sent away 3 weeks ago. You're my wife, my partner, a princess, in your own right. Whatever they're planning, we'll face it together." His confidence was reassuring, but Seraphina couldn't shake the feeling that her family's sudden interest in visiting was anything but innocent. She'd seen them destroy people before, not through direct confrontation but through whisper campaigns and social manipulation, turning allies against each other until their target was isolated and vulnerable. The Ashford party arrived 5 days later, traveling in a convoy of carriages that spoke of wealth and status. Seraphina watched from her window as they disembarked in the courtyard, her stomach churning with familiar anxiety. Her father looked exactly as she remembered, tall, distinguished, with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that made people assume he was important. Her mother was elegant as always, her blonde hair perfectly arranged, her blue gown cut in the latest fashion. And Isabel. Isabel had grown even more beautiful in the weeks since Seraphina had seen her, if such a thing were possible. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything she wanted, her golden hair catching the light like a halo. But it was the other members of their party that worried Seraphina most. Lord Blackwood, whose family controlled vast shipping interests, Lady Pemberton, whose husband was a close advisor to the king, Sir Reginald Thornfield, whose military connections made him a powerful ally or a dangerous enemy. These were not people who traveled for pleasure.
They were here for a purpose. Quite an impressive delegation, Dorian observed, joining her at the window. Your family certainly knows how to make an entrance. They're not here to celebrate our marriage, Seraphina said. They're here to end it. On what grounds? They'll find something, or create something if they have to. She turned away from the window, unable to watch any longer. Dorian, perhaps I should meet with them alone first.
If they see that I'm happy, that this marriage is working, absolutely not, Dorian said firmly. We present a united front or we don't present at all. Besides, I'm curious to see what they have planned. The formal reception took place in the castle's great hall, with Seraphina and Dorian seated on matching thrones that had been brought out for the occasion. It was a deliberate display of power and unity, designed to make clear that Seraphina was no longer the scorned daughter, but a princess in her own right. Lord Edmund, Lady Margaret, Dorian said as Seraphina's parents approached the dais. Welcome to Ravencroft Castle. I trust your journey was comfortable. Quite comfortable, Your Highness, Lord Edmund replied, his tone carefully neutral. Thank you for your hospitality. And Lady Isabel, Dorian continued, his gaze moving to Seraphina's sister. How lovely to see you again. Isabel curtsied gracefully, but Seraphina caught the flash of something ugly in her blue eyes. Your Highness, I must say, you look, well. Marriage agrees with me, Dorian said smoothly, as does having a wife who shares my interests and values. How fortunate, Lady Margaret interjected, her smile sharp as a blade. Though I confess we were surprised to hear that the marriage had been consummated so quickly. Seraphina was always such a shy child. The implication was clear. They were questioning whether the marriage was genuine or merely a political arrangement. Seraphina felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, Dorian's hand found hers. My wife is many things, he said, his voice carrying a note of warning. But shy is not one of them. She's proven to be quite passionate in all her endeavors. The double meaning wasn't lost on anyone in the hall, and Seraphina felt a surge of gratitude for his defense of her. Of course, Lord Edmund said quickly. We meant no offense. We're simply adjusting to seeing our daughter in such elevated circumstances. I'm sure the adjustment is difficult, Dorian replied. After all, you sent her here expecting quite a different outcome. The silence that followed was deafening. Lord Edmund's face went through several interesting color changes, while Lady Margaret looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. I'm not sure what you mean, Your Highness, Lord Edmund said finally. Don't you? How curious. I was under the impression that you'd sent Seraphina here hoping I would reject her, thereby giving you grounds to break our treaty without appearing to be the aggressor. That's a serious accusation, Lady Margaret said, her voice strained. It's a serious situation, Dorian replied calmly. Fortunately, your plan failed spectacularly. Seraphina has proven to be exactly what I needed, in ways you could never have imagined. Seraphina squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his unwavering support. For the first time in her life, she had someone fighting for her, defending her worth against the people who'd spent years tearing her down. Well, Isabel said, her voice bright with false cheer. I suppose all's well that ends well, though I do hope you won't mind if we stay for a few days. It's been so long since we've seen dear Seraphina, and there's so much to catch up on. Of course, Dorian said, though Seraphina could sense his reluctance through their mental bond. You're welcome to stay as long as you like. As the reception continued, Seraphina found herself watching her family and their allies with growing unease. They were too polite, too accommodating, too willing to accept the situation they'd clearly come here to challenge, which meant they were planning something else entirely. The attack, when it came, was not what Seraphina had expected. She was in the garden the next afternoon, reading in the shade of an ancient oak tree, when Isabel appeared on the path. Her sister looked as beautiful as ever, but there was something different about her, a hardness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Sister dear, Isabel said, settling onto the bench beside her without invitation. How lovely to see you looking so content. Isabel, Seraphina replied warily. I thought you were touring the castle with Mother. I was, but I wanted a chance to speak with you privately. There are things we need to discuss. Such as? Such as the fact that you're living a lie. Isabel's voice was still sweet, but there was poison beneath the honey. Do you really think Prince Dorian cares for you? Do you honestly believe that someone like him could love someone like you? I think, Seraphina said carefully, that you don't know anything about my marriage or my husband. Don't I? Oh, Seraphina, you poor deluded creature. He's using you, just like everyone else in your life has used you. The only difference is that he's better at making you believe you matter. You're wrong. Am I? Tell me, sister, what exactly do you think you bring to this marriage? What could you possibly offer a centuries-old vampire prince that he couldn't find elsewhere? The words hit their target with surgical precision, striking at every insecurity Seraphina had ever harbored about herself. She tried to push them away, to remember Dorian's words about her value and her purpose. But Isabel's voice was relentless. You're not beautiful, her sister continued. You're not charming or accomplished or politically useful. You're the same awkward, bookish disappointment you've always been. So what is it, Seraphina? What does he really want from you? He values my mind, Seraphina said, but her voice lacked conviction. Your mind? Isabel laughed, the sound like breaking glass. What's so special about your mind? You read books, yes, but so do thousands of other women. You're educated, but not exceptionally so. You're intelligent, but not brilliantly so. So what makes you think you're irreplaceable? Seraphina wanted to tell her about the memory keeper abilities, about the unique gift that made her valuable to Dorian, but something held her back. A lifetime of learning to keep her secrets close, to protect herself from those who would use her vulnerabilities against her. I don't have to justify my marriage to you, she said instead. No, you don't. But you should justify it to yourself. Isabel leaned closer, her blue eyes glittering with malice. Ask yourself, sister dear, if you didn't have whatever it is he needs from you, would he still want you? If you were just Seraphina, plain and ordinary and unremarkable, would Prince Dorian Blackthorne give you a second glance? The question hit like a physical blow, because it was the same one that had been haunting Seraphina's dreams. She loved Dorian, had come to love him more than she'd thought possible, but did he love her? Or did he simply value what she could do for him? I see I've given you something to think about, Isabel said with satisfaction. Good, because there's something else you should know. What? Mother and father aren't here to break up your marriage. They're here to ensure it continues, but on their terms. Isabel's smile was sharp as a blade. They've realized that having a daughter married to a vampire prince could be quite useful, politically speaking. So they're prepared to let you stay here, as long as you remember where your true loyalties lie. My loyalties lie with my husband. Do they? Even when those loyalties conflict with your family's interests? Even when supporting Dorian means betraying the people who raised you, who gave you life? The people who raised me spent 23 years telling me I was worthless, Seraphina said, anger finally overriding her hurt. Why should I feel any loyalty to them? Because blood is thicker than water, sister dear. And because if you don't cooperate, there will be consequences. What kind of consequences? Isabel's expression grew cold. The kind that could destroy everything you think you've built here. Did you really think we came unprepared? We know about your little gift, your ability to see vampiric memories. Seraphina's blood turned to ice. How could you possibly? We have our sources, and we know that gift comes with a price, one that could be quite dangerous if certain information were to become public. What are you talking about? Memory keepers don't just see vampiric memories, Seraphina. They absorb them, become changed by them. The more you use your ability, the less human you become. Eventually, you'll be neither human nor vampire, but something in between, something that both species will fear and reject. You're lying, am I? Ask your precious husband if he's told you everything about what you're becoming. Ask him if he's mentioned the memory keepers who went mad from absorbing too many foreign memories, who lost themselves so completely that they had to be destroyed for everyone's safety. Seraphina felt the world tilt around her. Was it true? Was she slowly losing her humanity with every memory she restored? And if so, did Dorian know? I can see you're beginning to understand, Isabel said with satisfaction. Your husband needs you, yes, but he's also destroying you bit by bit, memory by memory. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I need to think. Of course you do. But while you're thinking, remember this. We're your family, Seraphina. Whatever our faults, whatever our mistakes, we want what's best for you. Can you say the same about Prince Dorian? After Isabel left, Seraphina sat in the garden for a long time, her mind reeling with doubts and fears. Was her sister telling the truth about the dangers of her gift? And if so, why hadn't Dorian warned her? She thought about the times they'd worked together, the way she'd felt herself changing after each session. She'd attributed it to growing confidence, to the joy of finally finding her purpose. But what if it was something more sinister? What if she was slowly losing herself to the memories she absorbed? "There you are," Dorian's voice came from behind her, warm with affection. "Mrs. Hartwell said you'd been out here for hours." "I needed some air," Seraphina said without turning around. "Is everything all right? You seem distant." "Dorian," she said, finally facing him, "is there anything about my abilities that you haven't told me? Any dangers or side effects that I should know about?" Something flickered across his expression, too quickly for her to identify. But it was there. "What makes you ask? Just answer the question, please." Dorian was quiet for a long moment, and Seraphina felt her heart sink. If there was nothing to hide, he would have answered immediately. "There are risks," he said finally. "With any powerful ability, there are always risks." "What kind of risks?" "The human mind isn't designed to hold vampiric memories. Over time, the accumulated foreign experiences can begin to overwhelm your own identity." "You mean I could lose myself?" "It's possible, yes. But Seraphina, the risk is minimal if we're careful, if we don't push too hard or too fast." "You should have told me," she said, standing abruptly. "You should have warned me before I agreed to any of this. Would it have changed your decision?" "That's not the point. The point is that I had a right to know what I was risking." "You're right," Dorian said quietly. "I should have told you. I was afraid that if you knew the dangers, you wouldn't help me. And I needed you too much to risk losing you. So you lied to me. I omitted information. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm standing, it feels like betrayal." Dorian stepped closer, his storm-gray eyes pleading. "Seraphina, please. Yes, I should have been more forthcoming about the risks, but everything else between us is real. My feelings for you, my gratitude, your need for what I can do for you," she finished. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? You don't love me, Dorian, you love what I can give you." "That's not true, isn't it? If I didn't have this ability, if I were just an ordinary woman, would you have married me? Would you even have looked at me twice?" The hesitation before his answer told her everything she needed to know. "I thought so," she said, her voice hollow with disappointment. "Seraphina, wait." But she was already walking away, her heart breaking with the realization that Isabel had been right. She wasn't loved for who she was. She was valued for what she could do. And the worst part was that she'd allowed herself to believe otherwise, to hope that someone could actually care for her without ulterior motives. She made it to her chambers before the tears came, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She'd been such a fool, allowing herself to believe in fairy tales and happy endings. She was still the same worthless, disappointing creature she'd always been. The only difference was that now she had something someone wanted. A soft knock at the door interrupted her breakdown. "Go away," she called, not wanting to face anyone. "Your Highness, it's Mrs. Hartwell. I've brought tea." Despite everything, Seraphina found herself opening the door. Mrs. Hartwell had been nothing but kind to her, and she didn't deserve to be treated rudely. "Thank you," she said, accepting the tea tray with hands that still trembled. "Forgive me for saying so, Your Highness, but you look like someone who's had her heart broken." "Something like that." Mrs. Hartwell settled into a chair without invitation, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "Would you like to talk about it?" "What's the point?" "Nothing I say will change the fundamental truth, that I'm only valued for what I can do, not who I am." Mrs. Hartwell was quiet for a moment, studying Seraphina's face with the kind of penetrating gaze that seemed to see straight through to her soul. "Your Highness," she said finally, "may I tell you a story? If you like. 60 years ago, I came to this castle as a young woman, not much older than yourself. I was fleeing an arranged marriage to a man who saw me as nothing more than a broodmare for his heirs. I had no money, no family willing to help me, nowhere to go." Seraphina looked up from her tea, intrigued despite her misery. His Highness found me collapsed at his gates, half dead from hunger and exposure. He could have turned me away. After all, what use was a runaway bride to a vampire prince? Instead, he brought me inside, had me nursed back to health, and offered me a position in his household. That was kind of him. It was more than kind. It was transformative. But here's the thing, Your Highness. I wasn't just grateful for his charity. I was useful to him in ways neither of us expected. How so? Mrs. Hartwell smiled, and for a moment, Seraphina could see the young woman she'd once been. I had a gift for organization, for managing people and resources. Within a year, I'd reorganized his entire household, streamlined his finances, and turned this castle from a gloomy fortress into a proper home. His Highness didn't save me out of pure altruism. He saved me because he recognized something valuable in me. But that's exactly what I'm talking about, Seraphina said. He valued you for what you could do for him. Yes, he did. And I valued him for what he could do for me. Provide safety, purpose, a place where I belonged. That's not a flaw in our relationship, Your Highness. That's the foundation of it. Seraphina frowned, not understanding. Love isn't just about accepting someone despite their flaws, Mrs. Hartwell continued. It's about recognizing their strengths, appreciating their gifts, wanting to build something together that neither could create alone. His Highness values your abilities, yes, but he also values your intelligence, your courage, your willingness to help him despite the risks to yourself. How can you be sure? Because I've watched him for 60 years, Your Highness. I've seen him with other women, political allies, potential brides, even a few he claimed to care for. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. And how does he look at me? Like you're the answer to a prayer he didn't know he was praying. Seraphina felt fresh tears threaten. But what if I lose myself? What if using my abilities changes me so much that I'm no longer the person he fell in love with? Then you'll become someone new, and he'll fall in love with that person too. That's what marriage is, Your Highness, growing and changing together, supporting each other through whatever transformations life brings. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, not easy, but simple. Mrs. Hartwell leaned forward, her expression earnest. Your family has spent your entire life convincing you that you're not worthy of love unless you're perfect. But perfection isn't what makes someone lovable. It's authenticity, vulnerability, the willingness to be truly seen by another person. And you think Dorian sees me? Really sees me? I think he sees you more clearly than you see yourself. The question is, are you brave enough to let him keep looking? After Mrs. Hartwell left, Seraphina sat alone with her thoughts, turning the older woman's words over in her mind. Was it possible that she'd been viewing her relationship with Dorian through the distorted lens of her family's expectations? Had she been so conditioned to believe herself unworthy that she couldn't recognize genuine affection when it was offered? A soft knock interrupted her brooding. Seraphina? Dorian's voice came through the door, tentative and worried. May I come in? She hesitated, then opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. His dark hair was mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and there were lines of strain around his storm-gray eyes. I've been thinking about what you said, he began without preamble, about whether I would have noticed you if you didn't have your abilities. And you're right. I probably wouldn't have. Seraphina felt her heart sink, even though she'd expected this confirmation. But, Dorian continued, stepping into the room, that's not because you're unworthy of notice. It's because I'd spent 4 centuries avoiding meaningful connections with anyone. I'd trained myself not to see people as individuals but as potential threats or useful assets. That doesn't make me feel better. It should, because it means that when I did notice you, when your abilities forced me to really look at you, I saw everything. Not just what you could do for me, but who you are. Your intelligence, your compassion, your strength in the face of cruelty that would have broken lesser people. You're just saying that because you need me to keep working with you. Am I? Dorian moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Then explain this. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather journal, its pages filled with his elegant handwriting. What is it? Seraphina asked. A record of every conversation we've had since you arrived. Every smile, every laugh, every moment when you've surprised or delighted me. I started keeping it the day after our wedding, not because I needed to document your usefulness, but because I wanted to remember every detail of falling in love with you. Seraphina took the journal with trembling hands, flipping through pages of observations that had nothing to do with her abilities and everything to do with her personality. The way she hummed while reading, her habit of biting her lower lip when concentrating, the fierce protectiveness she'd shown toward an injured bird they'd found in the garden. "You've been watching me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been cherishing you," Dorian corrected. "Learning you, memorizing you, falling deeper in love with you every day. But the risks are manageable if we're careful. And Seraphina, even if they weren't, even if using your abilities meant losing you entirely, I would never ask you to sacrifice yourself for my memories. You're worth more to me than any lost recollection." "How can I believe that?" "Because I'm going to prove it to you." Dorian took her hands in his touch warm and steady. "No more memory sessions. No more risking your safety for my past. We'll find another way to recover what I've lost, or we'll learn to live without it." "You would do that? Give up the chance to reclaim decades of your life? For you? I'd give up everything." The sincerity in his voice, the love shining in his eyes, finally broke through the wall of doubt that Isabel's words had built around her heart. This was real. Not perfect, not without complications, but real. "I don't want you to give up everything," she said. "I want us to find a way to have both, your memories and my safety. There has to be a middle ground." "Are you sure?" "Because I won't pressure you, Seraphina. Not about this, not about anything. I'm sure, but I have conditions." "Name them." "Complete honesty from now on. No more omissions. No more protecting me from uncomfortable truths. If we're going to be partners, I need to know everything." "Agreed. And we work together to find safer methods. Maybe shorter sessions or ways to anchor my identity so I don't get lost in your memories. Whatever you need. And one more thing." Seraphina looked up at him, her heart full of love and determination. "We present a united front against my family. Whatever they're planning, whatever games they want to play, we face them together." "What are they planning?" Seraphina told him about her conversation with Isabel, about the threats and manipulations, about her family's sudden interest in maintaining the marriage for their own political gain. "They want to use our connection for their own purposes," she finished. "Turn me into a spy in your household, feeding them information about vampire politics and weaknesses." Dorian's expression darkened. "Over my dead body. They're not going to give up easily. And they have allies. Connections throughout the noble houses. They could make things very difficult for us. Let them try. They've made one crucial miscalculation." "What's that?" "They still see you as the powerless girl they sent away. They have no idea what you've become, what we've become together." Dorian's smile was sharp as a blade. "It's time to show them exactly how wrong they are." The confrontation came the next evening, during what was supposed to be a formal dinner celebrating the alliance between their families. Seraphina sat beside Dorian at the head table, wearing a gown of deep purple silk that made her look every inch a princess. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style that showcased the Blackthorne family diamonds, and she carried herself with a confidence that had been growing stronger every day. "Your Highness," Lord Edmund said as the final course was served, "I hope you won't mind if we discuss some matters of mutual interest." "Of course," Dorian replied smoothly. "What did you have in mind?" "Well, as I'm sure you're aware, the political situation in the human kingdoms has been fluid lately. There are opportunities for those with the right connections and information. I'm sure there are. And with Seraphina now part of your household, we thought perhaps there might be ways for our families to collaborate more closely." Seraphina felt Dorian's hand find hers under the table, a silent reminder that they were in this together. "What sort of collaboration?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Lady Margaret leaned forward, her smile predatory. "Nothing too demanding, dear. Simply sharing information that might be of mutual benefit. After all, you're privy to conversations and decisions that could affect both our peoples. You're asking me to spy on my husband." "Such an ugly word," Isabel said with a laugh. "We prefer to think of it as family loyalty." "My loyalty is to my husband and his people," Seraphina said firmly. "Not to a family that spent 23 years treating me as a disappointment." "Careful, daughter," Lord Edmund warned, his voice carrying a subtle threat. "You may be a princess now, but you're still our blood. And blood has obligations." "Does it?" Dorian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "How interesting.
because I was under the impression that you disowned Seraphina when you sent her here as an insult. That's not, Lady Margaret began. Oh, but it is, Dorian continued, his storm-gray eyes cold as winter. You made your intentions quite clear. You wanted me to reject her so badly that you were willing to sacrifice your own daughter's happiness for political gain. We were protecting our interests, Lord Edmund said stiffly, by throwing away the most valuable member of your family. Tell me, Lord Edmund, do you have any idea what your daughter is capable of? Do you understand the gift she possesses? We know she has certain abilities, Lady Margaret said carefully. Abilities that make her one of the most powerful individuals in either of our kingdoms. Abilities that could reshape the relationship between humans and vampires forever. Dorian's voice carried a note of pride that made Seraphina's heart swell. And you wanted to throw that away because she didn't fit your narrow definition of feminine perfection. Now see here, Sir Reginald interjected. There's no need for insults, isn't there? Seraphina stood, her voice ringing with newfound authority. You've spent my entire life insulting me, diminishing me, making me believe I was worthless. Well, I have news for you. I'm not worthless. I'm not a disappointment. I'm not a pawn in your political games. Seraphina, Isabel said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Don't be dramatic. We're family. No, Seraphina said firmly. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Family doesn't send their daughter away hoping she'll be rejected and humiliated. Family doesn't try to manipulate and control each other for personal gain. You ungrateful little... Lady Margaret began, rising from her chair. Careful, Dorian said, his voice carrying a note of warning that made everyone at the table freeze. You're speaking to my wife, a princess of this realm. I suggest you remember your manners. This is ridiculous, Lord Edmund said, his face flushed with anger. She's our daughter and we have rights. You have no rights here, Dorian said coldly. This is my domain, and Seraphina is under my protection. If you continue to threaten or harass her, you'll discover exactly why people fear the Vampire Prince. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, and Seraphina could see the other guests shifting nervously in their seats. This was Dorian's power on full display, not just his supernatural abilities, but his authority as a ruler who would not tolerate threats to those under his protection. You're making a mistake, Lady Margaret said, her voice shaking with rage. We have allies, connections. We could make things very difficult for you. Could you? Dorian's smile was sharp as a blade. How fascinating. Because I have allies too. Vampires who've lived for centuries, who've accumulated power and influence beyond your comprehension. Would you like to test your connections against mine? The silence that followed was deafening. Seraphina could see her family's allies exchanging nervous glances, clearly reconsidering their involvement in whatever scheme had brought them here. I think, Lord Blackwood said carefully, that perhaps we should return to our estates. This visit has been illuminating. Yes, Lady Pemberton agreed quickly. We wouldn't want to overstay our welcome. One by one, the other nobles made their excuses and departed, leaving only the Ashford family at the table. Lord Edmund's face was purple with rage, while Lady Margaret looked like she'd bitten into something rotten. But it was Isabel's expression that worried Seraphina most. Cold, calculating, filled with a hatred that promised future trouble. This isn't over, Isabel said as they prepared to leave. You may think you've won, sister dear, but you've made enemies tonight. Powerful enemies. Let them come, Seraphina said, surprised by her own courage. I'm not the frightened girl you used to torment. I have a husband who loves me, a purpose that fulfills me, and power you can't even imagine. I'm not afraid of you anymore. You should be, Isabel said softly. Because I know your weaknesses, Seraphina. I know exactly how to hurt you. Then you'll have to go through me first, Dorian said, moving to stand beside his wife. And I promise you, Lady Isabel, that's not a battle you want to fight. After the Ashford family departed, Seraphina and Dorian stood together in the courtyard watching their carriages disappear into the night. Do you think they'll cause trouble? Seraphina asked. Undoubtedly, but we'll be ready for whatever they try. Dorian turned to her, his expression soft with love and pride. You were magnificent tonight. The way you stood up to them, the strength you showed. I've never been more proud to call you my wife. I couldn't have done it without you. For the first time in my life, I had someone standing beside me, supporting me, believing in me. And you always will. Whatever comes next, whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together.
together," Seraphina agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted of love and hope and the bright promise of tomorrow. As they walked back into the castle hand in hand, Seraphina reflected on how much her life had changed. 3 months ago, she'd been the scorned daughter, sent away as an insult. Now she was a princess, a memory keeper, and the wife of a man who valued her for exactly who she was. Her family had tried to use her, to manipulate her, to turn her against the man she loved. But they'd failed, because they'd never understood the most important truth about love. It wasn't about perfection or usefulness or political advantage. It was about two people choosing to build something beautiful together, supporting each other through whatever storms life might bring. "Dorian," she said as they reached their chambers. "Yes? I love you. Not because you need me, not because I'm useful to you, but because you're kind and honorable and you make me want to be the best version of myself." "And I love you," he replied, "because you're brave and intelligent and you see the good in people even when they don't deserve it. Because you've made me remember what it means to hope for the future instead of just enduring it. Even if my family causes trouble? Especially then. Because whatever they throw at us, we'll face it together. And Seraphina? Yes? We're going to win." As they settled in for the night, Seraphina felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She'd found her place in the world, her purpose, her true family. And while she knew there would be challenges ahead, Isabel's threats were not idle ones. She also knew that she was no longer facing them alone. She was Princess Seraphina Blackthorne, memory keeper to the Vampire Prince, and she had finally found her happily ever after. The war, when it came, was not fought with swords or armies, but with whispers and rumors, social manipulation and political maneuvering. Over the following months, Seraphina watched as her family worked to undermine her marriage and her position, spreading stories about her unnatural abilities and questioning her loyalty to the human kingdoms. But they had underestimated both her strength and Dorian's influence. Together, they built alliances with progressive nobles who saw the value in cooperation between humans and vampires. They used Seraphina's abilities to uncover corruption and conspiracy among their enemies. And most importantly, they proved that love could triumph over prejudice, that understanding could overcome fear. When the final confrontation came, when Isabel arrived at the castle with forged documents claiming that Seraphina's marriage was invalid, they were ready. The truth came out in a dramatic trial before the combined courts of both kingdoms. The Ashford family's attempts at manipulation, their willingness to sacrifice their own daughter for political gain, their corruption and cruelty. In the end, it was Seraphina herself who delivered the killing blow, using her abilities to reveal the true memories of those who'd been manipulated by her family's lies. The truth, as it always did, set everyone free. "It's over," Dorian said as they stood together on the castle battlements, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Your family's power is broken. Their allies have abandoned them, and their schemes have been exposed for what they were." "I almost feel sorry for them," Seraphina said. "They could have had so much more if they'd just learned to love instead of control. Their loss is the world's gain, because their cruelty brought us together, and together we've built something beautiful. What happens now? Now we live," Dorian said simply. "We continue your training as a memory keeper. We work to build bridges between our peoples, and we enjoy the life we've created together. And if more enemies come, then we'll face them as we've faced everything else, together, with love and courage and the unshakable knowledge that we're stronger united than we ever were apart." As the sun rose over their domain, Seraphina thought about the journey that had brought her here. She'd been sent away as an insult, a deliberate slight meant to destroy a political alliance. Instead, she'd found her true calling, her real family, and a love that had transformed them both. The scorned sister had become a princess, the unwanted daughter had become irreplaceable, and the girl who'd been told she was worthless had discovered that she was priceless. It was, she thought with a smile, exactly the kind of ending she would have written for herself, if she'd ever dared to dream so big. "I love you," she said, the words carrying all the weight of her gratitude and joy. "And I love you," Dorian replied. "My memory keeper, my princess, my heart. Forever, forever and always." And as they stood together watching the dawn of a new day, Seraphina knew that some promises were meant to be kept for eternity. What an absolutely breathtaking transformation from family scapegoat to beloved princess. I'm still emotional from watching Seraphina discover her true worth through Dorian's eyes, and the way she finally stood up to her toxic family was absolutely triumphant. The twist that she was a memory keeper, one of the last of an ancient bloodline, was brilliant, turning what her family saw as a cruel joke into the most precious gift imaginable. And can we talk about that confrontation scene? The way Dorian and Seraphina presented a united front against her manipulative family, with him defending her worth and her finding the courage to reject their toxicity. That gave me chills. What did you think of the family dynamics? Did Isabel's cruelty feel realistic, or was she too cartoonishly evil? If you loved this incredible tale of hidden worth, true love conquering prejudice, and the courage to choose your own family, please hit that subscribe button. I have so many more amazing stories waiting for you. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Seraphina's abilities will continue to grow, or will she find ways to use them safely? And here's something that's been haunting me. Was Dorian's initial attraction purely about her abilities, or do you think he would have fallen for her personality eventually anyway? Next week, I'm bringing you another heart-stopping supernatural romance. Fallen angel pretends to be human teacher. The Demon Lord's son is in her class. Trust me, you won't want to miss that emotional masterpiece.